If you're going through this and you're thinking, how in the world am I going to connect to my sacral response? I've never heard an uh-huh or an uh-uh come out of my mouth in my life. Then you really want to pay attention to this next section on how to connect to your sacral response. Unfortunately, the sacral response has been trained out of most generators and manifesting generators because you guys don't usually get asked what you want. And if you do get asked, it's probably not in a way that gives your sacral something to respond to. There's a specific way that you need to be asked questions so that you're able to get your energy around the question in a way that you can gain clarity about it. So historically, most parents don't usually ask their children what they want. They just sort of pick for them or give them choices. And this doesn't really facilitate a generator, manifesting generator's clarity. And eventually, what happens is that the sacral just sort of shuts down. And then, if you've had parents, I know here in the South, this is pretty common because we're trained to say yes, ma'am, no, ma'am, and there's none of this stuff. So, if you were raised in that kind of an environment where you were chastised every time you said or you naturally learned how to shut that motor down, basically to shut up and go along with what everybody else was doing. So you can see how it would be very hard for you to hear your sacral response. So here's some tips about how you can begin to wake that sacral response up and reconnect with it. First of all, catch yourself doing something that you love to do that doesn't require any thought. So that may be something like eating delicious food, having sex, window shopping, anything that really relaxes your mind or puts you in direct contact with your senses. And as you're doing those activities, notice what noises you make without thinking about it. And if you're still kind of holding yourself back, imagine what noises you would like to make if you weren't holding yourself back. So this will begin to build a bridge between activities of the body and verbal responses to those activities. And if you're still feeling disconnected after you've worked with that process for a while, you may actually need to wake up your sacral center with touch or movement or healing work. The sedentary lifestyles that most of us live these days cause us to spend too much time in our heads. When we spend too much time at the computer or watching TV or texting on the phone or even driving in the car, our bodies shut down and we just get up in our mind and we start thinking and feeling like we can control things from the level of thought. Also, if you've had any kind of a trauma, it can disconnect you from your sacral response. It can disconnect you literally from your body. And this is where you're going to want to really look at possibly getting some healing work, some touch work done to reawaken your sacral motor, to reawaken your senses and your sacral center. So touch as in massaging your belly, movement as in walking or dancing, and healing work that helps you to reconnect with your body in general and also with your abdominal area. These things can really help you to physically wake up your sacral response, to physically bring back sensation into the sacral area. Now you may be wondering what kind of touch I'm talking about. So let's take a moment just to go through a little process, a little simple process that will show you how easy it is to physically get in touch with your sacral center. So get comfortable wherever you are. It helps you to put your feet on the ground if you can, just for the purposes of grounding and orienting. And now just put your hands on that lower belly, below your belly button and above your pubic bone. Then take some deep breaths. And as you breathe, notice how your abdomen goes in and out. And then notice the sensations that you're feeling under your hands. Keep breathing. You may feel heat there. You may feel a little buzzing. And now if you want to amp up that connection, take your hands and begin to slowly move them around the sacral center in a circle in a clockwise direction. So if you were facing your sacral, your hands would be moving as though they were moving around the clock. Or if you look down, you're moving your hands in a circle as though they were the hands on a clock. And continue to breathe. Now your sacral center is not just in the front, so go ahead and take your hands and just move them out around to your waist, around to the side of your body, one on either side. And you can do this in circular motions as well to begin to wake up that whole area. And then move your hands to your back, to your low back, and you'll feel that bone, the sacral bone at the base of your spine. Take your hands and just move them along your low back and let your fingers massage that sacral bone as well. Keep breathing and noticing the sensations that you feel. And now leave one hand back there. I tend to like to leave the left hand back there, but go with whatever you're comfortable with. And take the other hand and put it in the front where you started. Now just breathe. And imagine that you have a line of energy or a string connecting the palm of your front hand to the palm of your back hand. And imagine that you're moving heat between the two hands, between your two hands. And this whole area is heating up and becoming energized and opening up. And then when you're ready, you can go ahead and just take your hands off your sacral region and just feel what you feel in that area. Now, if you're still having trouble feeling the sensations in your sacral center, do this fairly regularly, like maybe do it every day for several days in a row until you start to feel that it's beginning to wake up, that your sacral is beginning to respond to the touch. So this is a simple way that you can physically begin to wake up that area and become more connected with your sacral center on a physical level. So try that, and then try the other exercise of catching yourself when you're doing activities that engage the senses and noticing what sounds you make or what sounds you want to make. And of course, give yourself permission if you're not making those sounds to make those sounds. These are just all little tips to begin to retrain your awareness and to reconnect you with your natural connection with this aspect of you that is so important because it's your guidance system. Now, you may also want to just practice freely vocalizing sacral sounds when it doesn't count. Like when you're standing at the refrigerator, that's a good place to start. You may also find out that you're actually vocalizing and you don't even know it. And this is when someone like a coach who knows about your sacral response can be very helpful in guiding you and making you aware of those sounds that you're naturally expressing. They can listen for it and then point it out to you. Now, once you get everything awakened, once you get this sense of your sacral center awakened, you can begin to further hone that relationship by getting other people to ask you yes and no questions. And this is what I'm talking about with the sacral sessions. You need to be asked yes and no questions. Open-ended questions a lot of times don't give you anything to respond to. Your sacral is very quick in its response, and it only has two responses in its vocabulary: a yes response or a no response. And it needs a quick yes or no question to engage it. If you've ever been asked, "What do you want to eat for dinner?" you probably already know that usually that's a very difficult question for you to answer, because it's one of these open-ended, what do you want to do questions. And how many times have you been in a situation with a friend where they're asking you, what do you want to do? And your response is, I don't know, what do you want to do? And most likely they were a sacral being as well, so they were probably coming back to you saying, I don't know, what do you want to do? So the way to remedy that when you're in those kinds of situations is just to ask the question, do you want to go to the movies? And then if your friend is a sacral being as well, your friend can say, do you want to go to the movies? And then you get that backup of confirmation through your sacral of, I want to go to the movies. Or maybe it's, A lot of times the sacral responds in a way that doesn't make logical sense. So you may think you want to go to the movies in this example, and that's why you're asking your friend, and your friend may want to go to the movies and respond with and then when your friend asks you if you want to go to the movies, you may actually say and it may be a surprise to you, but when you feel it in your gut, you'll know that it's correct. So always follow that gut feeling. And you may not know why it's correct, but if you follow it and you trust it, you're always going to end up in the most optimal place for what you need in your life. So going to the movies is kind of a small thing. But on those bigger questions where you're going to take bigger steps into your destiny, it's important that you really have this strong relationship with your sacral and you trust it, even if your response is something that is very surprising to you. So this is just a little overview of how to do a sacral session. And when we do our live meeting, I'll do a demonstration of how this is done. And you'll also get a handout of questions and guidelines that you can start to practice on your own with someone else. So first of all, find someone who's willing to sit with you and ask you yes and no questions. Ra Uru Hu used to suggest that you sit with another generator and then you ask questions back and forth. And that just sounds really delightful to me. Two generators sitting on the couch, really asking each other yes and no questions in that format where each of you gets to respond. each of you gets each other as you're asking these questions. So if possible, find a generator who's willing to sit with you and ask you yes and no questions, and then you can ask each other those questions. Number two, have them start with the questions that aren't particularly charged for you. The time to practice this is not when you're contemplating a big life change. The time to practice this is when you're relaxed and you're not in a place where you need clarity about something that's very, very important in your life. So the questions that you can start with to begin to warm up your sacral are things like, are your eyes blue? Do you like chocolate cake? Do you like red cars? Do you enjoy skiing? Are you working a full-time job? Do you want to work a full-time job? And that may actually get a little bit charged if you're wanting to get some clarity around your work situation, but you can begin to ease into those questions by starting with these questions that you're not really attached to. And what's really important is that you ask these questions at a fairly rapid pace to prevent thinking too much. So the person asking the questions needs to do it in a way where you only have a second or two to respond. Otherwise, it's too easy to get up in your head and begin to think out that question or to respond with an explanation or to want to talk it out when you're just wanting to get that gut level information right then and there. And if you're sitting on a couch with another generator or manifesting generator, it can be kind of like playing volleyball. You respond to a question, and then as soon as you respond, you ask that question to the other person. They respond, they ask you another question, and you can go back and forth at this rapid pace where you can get into this flow that removes your thinking mind from the process. And then number four is, if you need clarity on something important, have your partner slip those questions in when your sacral is all warmed up. So when you're really in this flow of, do you like chocolate cake? Do you like red cars? Are your shoes blue? Do you like cats? Do you like to bake? Do you want another pet in your life? After all of those, or in the midst of all of those, then they can slip in something like, do you want clarity on your job situation? And then from there, if it's an you can move into questions about that particular topic. So that's all I'm going to say about sacral sessions right now. I just wanted to give you the framework for sacral sessions for when we actually look at that in our live meeting.